Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for being able to make it. And my name is Jen. I have my camera off right now for camera quality and video quality purposes. And I am the director of content creation for Project Make a Statement. And I'm excited to work with you all. So once again, to reiterate, if you didn't know before, Make a Statement is a nonprofit that aims to educate youth and international students on public speaking and speech and debate. We offer free workshops and post weekly tips on our Instagram, which we will share the link at the end of this. And all profits made will go to low-income communities for political and public speaking education. So this curriculum is intended to educate students about the event and we're doing Congress while establishing your public speaking skills. And we have a wonderful guest speaker here to help us today. And take it away, Ronnie.
Hi everyone, I'm Ronnie. I'm a sophomore at Doherty Valley. I'm also one of the Congress captains this year. And I know I'm a sophomore and I might seem young, but I promise I have around 5 years of experience in the event now. Since being Congress captain in my competitive history, I finaled at every tournament but one that I've competed at this year. So I promise I know what I'm doing. And then I placed 7th and 8th at some of the largest tournaments in the country. But yeah. So if you ever have any questions after this, you can always reach out to me and I'll be happy to explain Congress to you. So first, what do you all know about the United States Congress? Not Congress as a debate event, but about the United States Congress. If you know something, you can just unmute and then say. William, do you know anything about the United States Congress? Okay, well, so it's basically a legislative body that creates and passes legislation to help make laws and make changes and better the lives of the American constituents. So Congress in terms of speech and debate, so we basically mimic the actual United States Congress by debating legislation and deciding whether we want to pass or fail it. So there's two legislative bodies. There's the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. So we refer to ourselves as representatives and senators. So be Representative Agrawal or Senator Bakaria. And the difference is that representatives come from the House of Representatives and Senate comes from the senators. And obviously senators are a higher position in Congress. So if you're in prelims, which is the preliminary round of competition, which is normally your first 3 rounds, then you'd normally be referred to as representatives. And then if you're in out rounds like quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals, you're most likely referred to as senators because it's just a higher title. So if you're in person, you'd be sitting in rows. But because we're online, you're most likely on Zoom or some other platform. And then you raise your placard to motion. Your placard is basically just a piece of paper that you have your last name written on, and then you write your pronouns under it. And then, Congress is the one debate event which is mixed with speech and debate. So while it's important to have good content and good argumentation, it's also important to make sure that you're speaking well. So the most important things to do are enunciate and project your voice so that everyone in the back can hear you, using rhetoric when needed. If you don't know, rhetoric is kind of just pretty language they use to spice up what you're saying. And then at the end, you want eye contact because at the end of the day, you're trying to resonate with your judge. The other difference is that in Congress, you never directly talk to the judge because we're mimicking the actual United States Congress, but you want eye contact with every other person in the chamber except your judge. So Congress in the debate setting is you basically, most events debate on resolutions, which is just 1-9, something like the United States shall adopt Medicare for all. But the difference with Congress is that you're debating on a specific bill with specific intentions, and they outline everything for you, or a resolution. So your goal is to convince your fellow representatives to pass or fail the legislation. So you do that by standing on a certain side of legislation and argue why your side wins the debate and why your side is more important and you should vote for your side. So you give 3-minute speeches, and this is a format for a constructive speech. There are a couple different types of speeches, but the most common is constructive, and this is the format for it. So you'd give an introduction. There are many different types of hooks. Their hook is no more than 10 to 15 seconds, and then you kind of just link that to your speech. So if I was giving an intro I would probably give my intro, and then if my bill was on voting, I would probably say something like, and that's why I stand on the strongest affirmative side of today's debate, and then you'd move on with your points. And then you have 2 points in a Congress speech, and each point has the same structure. So you first give a claim. You would say something like your claim, then you'd give a warrant, and then finally you'd give your evidence and then impact. And then your conclusion is normally no more than a couple words. Sometimes people give a sentence max, but most people just end with something like affirm or negate, depending on what side you're on. Are there any questions so far? Okay. So what is Congress and debate consenting? So you decide if you want to speak on the affirmative or the negation. So the affirmation is basically saying for the piece of legislation, like you should pass a piece of legislation, and the negation is you're speaking on like why you should fail this piece of legislation. So it's recommended that you prep for both sides because it's something called precedence. Precedence is basically that the speakers who have spoken the least amount of times will get the speech. So if I spoke third in the first bill and Jen spoke fifth in the first bill, or Jen hasn't spoken at all, then Jen would get the speech. So because she hasn't given the speech yet, so Jen would get the speech, and then maybe I might get side blocked, so I might have to flip. So you want to be able to prep for both sides. There's also something called an authorship, and that's where you wrote the piece of legislation and the tournament approved it. So what competitors do is they submit pieces of legislation to get good recency called an authorship. And so if you submit an authorship, then you automatically get it above precedence. And then there's something called recency, where precedence is the same, meaning people have the same amount of speeches, and the person who spoke least recently gets chosen. So if I spoke third and Jen spoke fifth, because fifth was the later speech, I would get the speech because I spoke third. And then bills versus resolution. So the difference is that we debate both bills and resolutions. But resolutions are things that Congress doesn't have power over, and they're mostly recommendations that we submit to them. That like we would submit to other legislative bodies, some maybe like the United States President, the executive branch, or we'd use to like condemn other countries. Bills would be topics that Congress does have power over, like implementing sanctions and like giving aid and stuff like that. And the difference is that bills can go effect immediately if passed, but resolutions require a congressional recommendation in order to get passed, and we would do whatever the resolution says, but it's not something that would be officially enacted. So this is like a more in-depth point structure. So your claim is basically a sentence explaining your point, and you would say something like pass or fail because blah, 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 whatever your claim is. Warrant would be, why does your point stand? And a lot of people don't put the warrant, but the problem is when you don't put the warrant, you can't access your impact. So in Congress, because it is a mixed speech debate, you want to spell everything out very clearly, but you still need to make sure that you have that link as to why your claim is true. So that's where your warrant comes in. So you say something like true because, and then whatever it is. So like if my claim was, pass today's legislation because it helps women. I would say true because when we increase the minimum wage, women get more access to jobs. And then my evidence, that would be something that supports your claim and your warrant. So it's important that it supports both of them. And then normally quantify it unless that doesn't make sense. So you would say something like, according to the New York Times on September 31st in 2020. So you always want to put the date so you know that your evidence is reliable and relevant. So if those are my claims and warrants, I would probably say something like, according to the New York Times, on September 31st of 2020, 63% of women saw a wage increase and employment increase when minimum wage was increased in Seattle. Something like that. And then your impact is probably one of the most important parts of your points. It's why did this matter? And in Congress, because you can't talk to your judge, you really need to take control of these impacts and show why to your judge, why does any of this matter? So you want to say, why is it important to pass or fail this legislation? So again, if we're going off that same point, I would probably say you pass today's legislation to make sure that every American constituent, no matter their race or their gender, gets a chance to have an equal paying job or something like that. And then you obviously want to elaborate more on that. Are there any questions about point structure? Okay, good. So these are some just like things you want to know, like tips or tricks for Congress. So you never want to rehash because some bills get very repetitive and you never want to rehash or bring up old arguments and evidence that people have already brought up because that doesn't bring the debate. And starting the first negative speaker, you should always have refutations. Refutations are basically at the most basic level Senator X said blah, 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 but that's not true because blah, blah, blah. Or Senator X said this, but my point is more important because of this. You also want to know your place in the round and structure your speech to where in the round you're speaking. So if you're speaking in a chamber of 16 people, speeches 1 through 8 are constructive. That's kind of the style that we went through before. It's the most fully written out speech. It's very structured and basically gives the points that will be referenced throughout the round for latter speeches, and they should still have refutations. Speeches 9 through 14 would be refutation speeches, which focus on refuting the other side. You have the option to bring up maybe one new point if you want to, but those give like refutations. You're basically taking the time to refute other people's arguments on the other side with evidence, or use your side's arguments to refute the other sides and stuff like that. Speeches 15 to 16, so that would be the last affirmative and the last negative speech. Those would be the crystallization. So you break the speech down into its most important impacts. Normally people choose like 2 impacts. And then you prove why your side wins the debate. And you do that by weighing, which is how you prove that your argument has more weight. Or you do that with a mix of refutations and weighing. And you can it's good to bring up evidence still in all of these speeches to review and weigh arguments, but never read like too many cards of evidence. And in Congress, you want to read like huge paragraphs. You kind of just want to read like lines from the evidence. We also have something called questioning, and that's where there's 2 types of questioning. There's direct, which is you get a 30-second block just to question them no matter how you want. Or there's indirect, where you only get 1 question. So most online tournaments are using direct. And that's where you use those questions to poke holes in other people's speeches and set up your points. You can, if you're going to speak next, then maybe set up your points that you're giving and kind of just use it as a way to prove why they're wrong. You also want to refute, because refuting is one of the most important things, because that's like one of the best ways to distinguish that this is a debate event at the end of the day. So Congress is a debate event, but it does still have speech components. I personally like to think of it as 75-25 or 70-30 as for speech, because it is a debate event, but there are still speech components. So you need to enunciate your words so that everyone knows what you're saying. You need voice fluctuation to kind of resonate with your judge, because again, when you're not talking directly to your judge, it's very, very difficult to get your points to resonate with them. So you want voice fluctuation and tone fluctuation. Speak clearly so that your judges and competitors can understand you. You want to maintain eye contact with every single person in the chamber. So kind of just like scan the room. Don't like keep going back and forth, but just like parts of your speeches look at different people and make sure that you're constantly maintaining eye contact. You want to explain to your judge why your side matters the most using all of these skills without directly talking to them. Because when you do talk to your judge, you kind of break this environment as modeling the United States Congress, and that's not good, obviously, because your ballots will get dropped. Are there any questions? Okay, so now we're going to do a drill. So you're basically going to create, let's say like 15 minutes. So this is a piece of legislation, and then take like 15 minutes to create a claim warrant data impact, like I explained, in about 10 to 15 minutes. So just like read the bill, and then if you don't understand it, you can just ask. Okay, is everyone done? Can someone respond? I don't know if you're done or not. Okay, so no one responded, so I'm just gonna assume you're done. So I'm just gonna assume that no one's gonna respond if I tell you to go first. So, um, Bruce, do you wanna go first? Okay. Um, well, just practice giving your CWDI anytime that you want, but that's all that I had. So Jen, if you just wanna like explain the last things, then yeah.
Yeah, of course. So, for this, I just wanted to say thank you, Ronnie, for being a great guest speaker today and just like for helping out and giving a great lecture. And then for Make a Statement, once again, just to reiterate, follow us on Instagram since we have a bunch of tips and we also have our announcements as well as new workshops coming out. And here is our link to our Instagram. Just a quick thing though, our Instagram is not at Make a Statement Project, it's actually at Project Make a Statement. So that was an error on our part, but our email is projectmakestatement@gmail.com. So please feel free to reach out through those platforms. And then also, just to reiterate, once again, we are hosting more workshops in the future. Our next one, I believe, it's sometime in December, but our next one should be Parley Debate. So if you're interested in that, check it out and sign up. We'll send a link out the day before, just like this workshop. So yeah, just if you're interested in more events or if you want to learn more about it before you actually compete, please feel free to join those workshops and we'll be happy to have you.